Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments in Gaza, the West Bank, and Lebanon. In Gaza, Israel carried out a series of massacres in the north and central areas, targeting school shelters and the tents of displaced people. In the northern Gaza Strip, Israeli forces have imposed a siege on the Jabalia refugee camp for the last 5 days, issuing forced evacuation orders and surrounding the camp with tanks and armored quadcopters. Earlier today, at least 10 Palestinians were killed when Israeli forces bombed the tents of displaced people in Jabalia. Al Jazeera reporter Tarek Abu Azoum stated on Tuesday that the Israeli army is, quote, systematically working to empty northern Gaza. Journalist Hossam Shabat reported that when people have tried to leave Jabalia, they've been shot at by Israeli snipers. Quote, many residents are on the streets bleeding as Israeli forces have destroyed ambulances and are targeting anyone who tries to help. The situation in the north is horrific and very dangerous. There are currently hundreds of thousands trapped, and the shelling is nonstop. Novelist Ahmed Massoud, who has been on this live stream several times over the last 12 months, said that on Sunday, quote, the Israelis went into my elderly uncle's house in Jabalia. They beat him up and then ordered them to leave one by one. My uncle and his wife can't walk easily. They separated them from their children, who were sent in different directions, navigating drone shooting. Mahmoud Shalha, reporting from Jabalia on Tuesday, filmed this footage of a quadcopter shooting inside Jabalia camp.
الآن إطلاق نار من قبل طائرات الكوادكوبتر.
The Israeli army ordered the evacuation of the Al Auda hospital, the Indonesian hospital, and the Kamal Adwan hospital, the last 3 medical facilities partially functioning in northern Gaza. Abed Zwedi, another journalist in the north, reported from the Kamal Adwan hospital on Tuesday that the army was besieging the medical facility, which has already been overwhelmed with the dead and injured from recent Israeli attacks. Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, director of Kamal Adwan Hospital, stated that his staff would defy the evacuation orders. He told Al Jazeera, quote, we have babies and newborns that are in the ICU. Even if we can evacuate a few patients, we cannot leave the hospital because there's no other hospital that is providing services and treatment to children except Kamal Adwan. We will continue to provide services even if the army enters the hospital, the doctor added. We will continue to provide services because we are providing, first of all, humanitarian services that are not violating international humanitarian law, and we are urging all international organizations to support us. A doctor at the Indonesian hospital stated early this morning that, quote, for the past 2 days, the road to the hospital has been blocked and we haven't been able to reach it. Today, the hospital was threatened with evacuation or it will be bombed. Many of my fellow doctors are trapped inside, unable to leave as quadcopter drones target any movement around the hospital. More than 40 Palestinians were killed on Tuesday alone, according to Palestinian medical sources. Israel attacked Gaza City on Monday, targeting residential buildings. Reporter Ibrahim Al-Khalili reported from the Zaytun neighborhood after an Israeli strike.
We are talking about targeting 𝐓𝐡𝐞 family here in the Zaytun neighborhood. As you can see, this is the scale of the destruction inflicted to this home after the Israeli fighter jets targeted this house here in the Zaytun neighborhood. This is the aftermath. As you can see, people are trying to get the trapped civilians from under the rubble here in Al Zaytun neighborhood. Relentless airstrikes targeting northern Gaza today. As you can see,
that was Ibrahim Al-Khalili reporting from Zaytun in Gaza City yesterday. On Monday, Israeli forces attacked the tents of displaced people in Al Burej refugee camp in central Gaza. Areas in central Gaza were attacked numerous times this past week, including by consecutive missile strikes early Sunday morning on the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Mosque in Deir Balah and the Ibn Rushd School in Al-Zuwaydah that has been turned into a shelter for thousands of displaced Palestinians. At least 26 people were killed in the two attacks and more than 90 injured. In Rafah on Tuesday, 8 Palestinians were killed when an Israeli drone bombed people gathering to collect water at a filling station, according to the Palestinian news agency Wafa. Israel killed another journalist over the weekend, bringing the number of assassinated reporters and media workers to nearly 180 since October 2023. Hassan Hamad was a 19-year-old journalist who worked with Al Jazeera and other media outlets. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike on his home in northern Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp on Sunday, days after they said he was warned by an Israeli officer to stop filming in Gaza, according to Al Jazeera. His friends and colleagues carried his body parts in plastic bags, along with his flak jacket with press emblazoned across it. Journalist Hossam Shabat stated, quote, "I just saw my friend and colleague Hassan Hamad an hour ago. Israeli occupation forces have just killed him, and what remains of his body is in pieces in a plastic bag. Why do I have to see my friends in plastic bags? Why is this world so cruel to us?" Just hours ago, Israel targeted another group of journalists covering the ongoing siege of Jabalia camp. Reporter Anas Al-Sharif stated that Al-Aqsa TV cameraman Mohammed Al-Tanani was killed and correspondent Tamer Labad was injured. Al Jazeera cameraman Fadi Al-Wahidi was shot in the neck and injured as well. The Geneva-based Euromed Human Rights Monitor issued a report this week documenting the, quote, "most prominent crimes committed over the past 12 months. Since Israel's genocide began a year ago, the group states an estimated 10% of Gaza's population has been killed, injured, reported missing, or detained as a result of Israeli military assaults. The Israeli army employs explicit methods designed to inflict severe physical and psychological trauma on the population," Euromed explains. These include launching thousands of systematic military assaults on civilians, dramatically increasing deaths among people of reproductive age, separating families, targeting the healthcare system, and imposing brutal living conditions marked by starvation and malnutrition. The obstruction of humanitarian aid further exacerbates these atrocities, creating life-threatening situations for thousands. The international aid organization Oxfam stated this week that more women and children have been killed in Gaza by the Israeli military over the past year than the equivalent period of any other conflict over the past 2 decades. Records, which the group says are not comprehensive, show that Israeli explosive weapons hit, on average, homes every 4 hours, tents and temporary shelters every 17 hours, schools and hospitals every 4 days, and aid distribution points and warehouses every 15 days. At the same time, Euromed Monitor says that Israeli forces have worked to eliminate almost 80% of the agricultural land in the Gaza Strip from use by Palestinians. The group says that Israel has done this either by isolating it in preparation for its forcible annexation to the so-called buffer zone, or by bulldozing or destroying it by other means, such as bombardment, all of which are in violation of international law. According to the Euromed Monitor field team, Israeli forces stormed the area of Al-Shima in Beit Lahia, northern Gaza, just 2 weeks ago. Accompanied by military bulldozers, the forces began their bulldozing operations, destroying more than 500 dunams of newly replanted agricultural land, which was supposed to sustain the needs of the people living in northern Gaza, who are subject to an arbitrary siege and systematic starvation by Israel. The Israeli destruction of these agricultural lands, the majority of which were filled with eggplants, reflects Israel's insistence on preventing the Palestinian people from depending on the region's agricultural food basket during a period when sufficient supplies of vegetables and other foods are being kept out of the northern Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza reported this week that around 1,000 health workers have been killed since last October, and that only half of Gaza's hospitals are partially functional. The World Health Organization estimates that since October 2023, there have been at least 516 attacks on healthcare in Gaza. Israel has also prevented essential medications and medical supplies from entering Gaza, depleting stockpiles. Healthcare Workers Watch issued a report this week showing that 105 senior physicians were killed or detained by the Israeli military over the last 12 months, constituting 23% of Gaza's most experienced physicians, they add. The Electronic Intifada published a feature this week written by Rasha Abu Jalal, who describes how her brother-in-law, Yazan Yunus, has tried to access basic medical care as the Israelis continue to decimate Gaza's health infrastructure. Quote, there are 500,000 scheduled surgeries on the waiting list in Gaza hospitals, Dr. Abdul Latif Al-Hajj of the Health Ministry told Rasha for the Electronic Intifada. This week, we published several features and analysis pieces reflecting on the year-long genocide in Gaza. Asim Al-Nabih, an engineer currently serving as the spokesperson and a member of the emergency committee at the Gaza City municipality, writes that the municipality sustained extensive damage with the deliberate targeting of its infrastructure and vital facilities. He writes that this includes the destruction of 800 kilometers of roads, 62 central water wells, 90,000 meters of water pipelines, 8 sewage pumping stations, and more than 30 administrative buildings. Moreover, 165,000 meters of stormwater and sewage networks were damaged, along with the uprooting of more than 55,000 trees. The city's cultural centers, children's facilities, public parks, seafront, and public squares were not spared either. Beyond the physical damage, the war has deepened Gaza's environmental and health crises. Around 160,000 tons of waste have piled up across the city, and large quantities of sewage have leaked into the sea in various areas, threatening the local environment. Al-Nabih adds that, quote, the accumulation and burning of waste has also led to increased emissions and pollution, resulting in heightened disease outbreaks, especially among children. Insects and rodents have spread rapidly, further escalating health risks. All of these burdens were initially shouldered by just 100 men in the first months of the war: engineers, technicians, laborers, and heavy machinery operators. Over time, more of our colleagues joined, bringing the total number of emergency workers to 250, representing just 15% of the municipality's pre-war workforce. Despite the enormous challenges and the unprecedented length of this war, Gaza Municipality and its teams continue to work with minimal equipment but unyielding determination. The mission remains to alleviate the suffering of the citizens who have been ravaged by war for more than 365 days. All those efforts were truly worthwhile as they saved lives and brought water to hundreds of thousands. We will continue because there is still so much to do, more lives to protect, and more hope to bring. The names of the men who carried the city in their arms when it was on the verge of collapse may be forgotten, and their deeds may not be immortalized in history books, but the city's ancient stones will forever remember their efforts and sacrifices. Their contributions will be etched into Gaza's long history, adorned with countless triumphs throughout the ages. That's from Gaza Municipality's first year under fire by Asim Al-Nabih on electronicintifada.net. And our contributor Abu Bakr Abed wrote a piece for us this week in which he describes the current situation in Deir Balah, the central Gaza Strip town where he lives. Here's an excerpt of his feature. Entire squares have been reduced to rubble, entire neighborhoods have been destroyed, and entire families have vanished. Tents are scattered along the beach and the few remaining streets. Traumatized children queue for hours to get a sip of water. The sound of mothers sobbing in agony over the loss of their loved ones is never far away. The city, which used to feel like a sanctuary and lived through many wars and escalations that always rubbed salt into its wounds, now symbolizes our general suffering. Israel's ceaseless bombardment makes my family and I anxious all the time. There's hardly any food. I remember a day when I had to eat canned pet food and rotten wheat seeds. I had constant gastroenteritis and fatigue due to malnutrition in the following days. Every day is a struggle to survive. We drink unfiltered water. Our lives might end in an instant. Despite being deprived of their harvest last year, farmers in Deir Balah have managed to salvage some plants and trees and are readying to collect their fruits this month. October is the harvest month, a time when we see bunches of dates and buckets of olives all around. And this year, despite the genocide, we will live the same days. We will simply restore our euphoria and joy. I have a yellow rose, a jasmine tree, some homegrown basil, 2 palm trees, and 3 olive trees in my garden. That's how I define hope. In every house standing in my neighborhood, even in my city, are plants and olive and palm trees. Our souls are beautiful, and so are Deir Balah and Gaza. This is the reality the entire world needs to know. That's from 1 Year of Genocide and Our Souls Remain Beautiful by Abu Bakr Abed on electronicintifada.net. Turning to the occupied West Bank, an Israeli fighter jet fired missiles at a building in the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 refugee camp on the night of October 3rd, killing 18 Palestinians, including 3 children. Our colleague Tamara Nassar writes that 3 Israeli missiles penetrated the roof of the building, passing vertically through the 3rd and 2nd floors and landing on the 1st. The missiles destroyed the building entirely and damaged nearby homes. Israel was targeting members of Palestinian armed resistance in the camp who were ostensibly at a cafe on the bottom floor. 7 members of Qassam Brigades, the military wing of Hamas, were killed in the strike. The group acknowledged that their commander, Zahi Yasser Ufi, was killed as well. Israel's airstrikes also killed an entire Palestinian family who lived in an apartment next to the cafe. Mohammed Abu Zahra and his wife Saja were home with their 2 children, Karam Mohammed Abu Zahra, 5 years old, and Sham Mohammed Abu Zahra, 8 years old, when Israel bombed the building. The bodies of the parents and their young children were found mangled together after an hour of searching, according to a field investigation by the human rights group Defense for Children International Palestine. A 3rd child, 16-year-old Mohammed Mahmoud Anbas, was killed in the cafe when the Israeli airstrike took place. Extrajudicial executions have been a cornerstone of Israel's efforts to repress all Palestinian resistance in the territories it occupies and beyond. Nearly 700 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since October 2023, according to the UN Human Rights Office. Approximately 190 of them were killed by airstrikes. In Tulkarem alone, 88 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli airstrikes in the last 12 months. The latest Israeli airstrike brings the number of Palestinian children killed in the occupied West Bank since the beginning of the year to 83, including 2 U.S. citizens. For more, read Tamara Nassar's report, Israeli Bombing Kills Entire Family in West Bank, on electronicintifada.net. And now briefly to Lebanon. As Israeli airstrikes relentlessly target areas in the south and inside the city of Beirut, the UN Children's Fund UNICEF says that as of October 4th, at least 100 children have been killed in Lebanon, and more than 690 children have been injured in the last 6 weeks. Lebanon's health ministry has said that 2,000 people have now been killed in Israeli attacks on the country. The aid organization Oxfam says that as more than 1 million people in Lebanon are fleeing, shelters are buckling under the strain. According to Al-Manar News, Israel launched more than 30 airstrikes early Sunday morning that were described as the most intense since the onset of aerial aggression on Beirut's southern suburbs 2 weeks ago. The Israeli airstrikes targeted the old airport road, which connects the city center to Beirut International Airport. Al-Manar added that volunteers who searched for survivors reported that Israeli aircraft were dropping explosives around targeted buildings in Beirut's southern suburb of Dahia to hinder the work of civil defense teams. Israeli drones continuously fly over the southern suburbs, employing armed drones equipped with precision-guided missiles to disrupt search and rescue operations, Al-Manar added. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, called on Sunday for greater international support to stem the humanitarian catastrophe engulfing Lebanon. Quote, "I've witnessed today the tragic toll this war is taking on entire communities," Grandi said. "International humanitarian law must be respected and cannot be ignored. Families have been left homeless, stranded in the open air with traumatized children unable to understand what's happening. They all told me how desperate they are to feel safe and for the airstrikes to stop so they can return to their towns and villages." And finally, we wanted to share this short video produced by Breakthrough News, highlighting 1 year of protests around the world in support of Palestinian liberation.
Been out in these streets for a year now. The people of Palestine know this. The people of Yemen know this. The people of Lebanon know this. The people of Iran, the people of Syria, the people of Haiti, the people of Puerto Rico, the global South know this. And we, in the belly of the beast, must be reaffirmed that this is a long march and we're walking with millions of people across this globe.
And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza.